So yes, thank you so much, everyone. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Billie. I am the head of comedy for Vault Festival. My pronouns are she, her. I have worked in the comedy industry for nearly 10 years now, and I have been attending the Edinburgh Fringe Festival since I was 14, so got quite a few years under my belt. Joining me from the Vault Festival team is the lovely Izzi, who is the press and media manager for Vault Festival, but has had a lot of experience in Edinburgh. Izzi, do you want to have a quick introduction to yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Izzi, my pronouns are she, her. Yeah, I'm press and media manager for Vault Festival, and I've been doing that for the last sort of 3 years-ish. But previously to that, I worked at Pleasance as their marketing manager, and I've also done quite a lot of freelance work sort of around my Vault Festival work as a PR for Edinburgh. I've gone up as an artist. So like Billie, I've got quite a few years under my belt doing different things.
Thanks, Izzi. And yeah, I'll do a quick run through of all of our lovely panelists today, and then they're going to give you a proper introduction very shortly. So we have Ryan Taylor, who is the head of comedy at the Pleasance, with us here. Katy Koren, artistic director of Gilded Balloon. Thomas Wales, who is the programming assistant at Underbelly. Jodie Adams, who is programmer and producer for Assembly. Steve Bugeja, comedian and also the co-creator of ITV2's Buffering. Steve's taken up a load of shows to Edinburgh. And Owen Donovan, the managing director of Berk's Nest and also the co-founder of the Live Comedy Association. So yeah, that is who is here today. So let's get into it. It would be great if you guys, we can sort of go around and you could give us a quick brief introduction on yourself and how you started in the industry. Owen, should we start with you?
Thanks. My name's Owen. My pronouns are he, him. I run Berk's Nest. We produce a lot of shows up in Edinburgh. It'll probably be around 20 or so. And we also take shows on tour around the UK. And I started in comedy by going to the Fringe and working on a show, flyering and sort of stage managing it in 2012, but sort of accidentally, like a friend was supposed to have this job and then couldn't do it anymore. And I went and had an amazing month, and it was like, okay, this is something that that could be something long term. And then that kind of spiraled way out of control to now producing like 20 shows happening every day in a month. Yeah, that's me.
Oh, great. Thanks, Owen. Katy, what about you?
Hello, my name's Katy. I am part of the mother-daughter team that runs Gilded Balloon. I'm the daughter part. Yes, I've been running shows at the Gilded Balloon and part of the Gilded Balloon since I was born in 1988. Never missed a Fringe, and yeah, have been to every single Fringe since then. Karen started the company in 1986 and is still very much part of the programming team. Both of us run the company together and program the venue together, and do a hell of a lot more than that. But yes, that's our main Fringe focus at the moment.
Amazing, thanks. And Jodie, a bit about you, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Jodie. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the producer and programmer at Assembly Festival. I've been there for about 3 years, but Assembly itself has been running for a long time. It's our 40th anniversary this year, although, well, technically it was our 40th anniversary in 2020, but we're going to ignore the last couple of years. And Assembly program and produce about 230 shows every festival. We have about 23 different spaces, and we program comedy, theatre, cabaret, circus, basically anything you can perform live, we'll consider it basically. I started in the industry. Well, I was in a fringe play, a student fringe play in 2005, and then since then I've kind of done every fringe job under the sun: flyering, marketing, bar work, front of house. I had a brief interlude in television, but then, you know, live stuff called me back, so here I am now.
Great, thanks, Jodie. Steve, why don't you tell us how you began?
Hey, I'm Steve. My pronouns are he and him. I am a performer, a comedian, and writer, I guess. I have been doing the Fringe since 2012. I did a few sort of free Fringe triple header shows with some mates at the time. And then in 2013, 14, I did like a package show at the Pleasance called Comedy Zone, which is where they sort of put together 4 budding comedians, and it was like a prestigious show where lots of famous comedians had done it in the past. And we were the last ever year because we didn't sell enough tickets. So we destroyed that Fringe institution, as I'm sure Ryan knows. But it was good. It was good fun. And then after that, from 2015, I have taken 5 solo Edinburgh hour shows up in a row up until the pandemic, which brought a welcome rest from that sequence.
Lovely. Thomas, what about you?
Hello, my name's Thomas. I'm one of the programmers at Underbelly program across comedy, theatre, dance, circus, and all of our programmers program across genre. We don't have one specific programmer for specific genre. I started in the Fringe world when I was 18 and volunteering at the Edinburgh Fringe. And since then, I've worked at Adelaide Fringe, I've worked at Brighton Fringe, I worked in producing and programming at Vault Festival for a little while, as well as working in operations. And I've been with Underbelly for 3 years. Again, a bit of a grey over the past year, but about 3 years, thereabouts.
Thanks. And Ryan, give us a bit about yourself.
Hello, Ryan from the Pleasance. My pronouns are he, him. I'm head of comedy at the Pleasance. We've been going on the Fringe for about 37 years. And we've got 2 sites. We're the yellow one of all the venues. And yeah, I've been doing it since, I've been working for the Pleasance since 1999, and been doing this job for 18 years. So really should be doing something else by now. And yeah, and I'm just basically in charge of choosing the comedy shows and putting the comedy program together and the kind of, yeah, anything comedy related at the Pleasance.
Lovely. Would you give us like a quick roundup of what your average day looks like when you're up in Edinburgh?
Oh, in Edinburgh, wake up to all the problems of the night before, and then deal with all the problems that are happening that day. Late running shows, things gone missing, stuff broken into, people being arrested. It could be anything really. Cancelled shows, you know, anything and everything really. Extra shows.
So good and bad then.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Owen, what about you as a sort of promoter? What does your day look like from start to finish?
We tend to start the day with a production meeting with the whole team, both like producers and our marketing team, and we sort of run through the day of like what, yeah, similar to Ryan, what's happened overnight, and then what does the day look like? Like, where is there a really quiet selling show that has like press going in today, and like what's the plan for that? And yeah, what do we want to add extra shows, or this thing has broken? All of the similar problems from a different perspective, really. What do I need to talk to Ryan about that day? And yeah, that kind of then just kicks off the rest of the day, and that will happen way before any of the shows are happening, and way before any like flyering is starting or whatever, and then the kind of team fans out across all of our shows, and then there's no set schedule for the rest of the day after that.
Great. Well, thanks so much, guys, and we'll sort of open the floor a little bit to a discussion, so feel free to jump in if you want to add anything in that anyone else is saying on this bit. But one of the questions that we had quite a few people ask us was, why should someone bring their show to Edinburgh? Obviously, it's a massive financial risk, and it's been a really tough couple of years. Jodie, do you have anything to say that could, you know, persuade someone to bring a show that is maybe a bit unsure?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would say if you're unsure, maybe don't come to Edinburgh. I'm not in the business of persuading people if they're not absolutely sure that their show is ready to go and they're confident in it. The 3 main reasons that people tend to come is firstly to make money. That tends to be very constrained to very big name comedians that don't have a lot of overhead. So that's a very specific one. The second one is to try out your show and get feedback for your show. So if you have a work in progress and you want to gain audience reactions or know how it's going to run, there's really nothing better than run it through it once a day for a whole month. It really gives you a really inside knowledge of your show. And the third one is to kind of show it to the world. It acts as a great marketplace to get on with touring. Those three things I think still all apply this year. Obviously, everything's still very uncertain and none of us really know whether the audience will be back in number or whether it's going to look exactly the same, but I think those are still sound reasons. But I would suggest interrogating really strongly why you want to come. Don't come if you're worried that you're going to lose money or you have money that, don't come if you're not, you're putting up money that you're not prepared to lose. Don't come if you don't think the show is in a good place to come. Don't come if you're unsure about it. Make sure you're really certain in your reasons, because it is, it's a big beast.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Steve, as a performer, what are the sort of reasons that drive you to go up every year and take up those 5 shows?
Let's not get into my personal reasons, but I think that I genuinely see the Edinburgh Fringe as an incredible place to develop. Like, that's how I view it. I know a lot of comics will have like specific career aims when they go up there, which is great. You might want to get seen by the booker for like the Apollo or whatever it is, which is that's all valid and good, and you might want to take it on tour. But actually, I think the real sort of tangible thing you get out of the Fringe every single year is you just get better at doing comedy, because you do it for 25 hours in a row, and then you'll do loads of extra shows as well. You'll probably do 40, 50 extra shows, and like sort of short spots, and you just get better at comedy, and it's just the most intensive way to get better at this job. And it's just a lot of fun. So yeah, there is loads of financial risk, and you should absolutely consider all of that. But just from a creative point of view, it's the best place to be doing this job. And that's why I go. That's why I think I've gone every year, because I enjoy it, and I feel better at comedy when I come home, and my bank balance is slightly smaller.
And Ryan, you said you've been doing this job for 18 years. Is there a reason that you keep coming back to the festival?
I think because no two years are the same. There's always a kind of, as soon as you've started the first year, you then see a brand new load of acts, and you get excited again, and you kind of want to see how the festival pans out. And yeah, I just say it's the Fringe, although it is only in August, is a circle that just keeps going. As soon as we get back from Edinburgh, you decompress for a month, and then you start programming and booking for the next Edinburgh. So it's really hard to get out of that cycle. Because it's a brilliant place to be for a month.
Great, thanks guys. Well, Katy, I'm going to come to you now. I would love to know, as a programmer, what the artists, when they're submitting their applications, what kind of thing are you looking for? What are the sort of tips and tricks you could give them? Obviously, everyone here is keen to find out more about taking up shows and how they can impress you all.
Yeah, sure. Just to add to the last question before we move on, was about being inspired. I think as well as learning your own craft and becoming a better performer, seeing other shows and that kind of density of different work, being able to see that and learn from other people and your peers is incredible about the Fringe as well. And obviously there's a lot of ways that performers can see stuff for nothing as well, which is good. There's a lot of opportunity for free tickets and that kind of thing. In terms of applications, I'm looking for passion and as much detail as possible. I want somebody that is passionate about what they're doing and why they're bringing it to Edinburgh. Why should somebody come and see your show? And then I think a lot of people kind of forget to explain the content of the show, tell us what the show's about, and then the detail of what exactly it is that they need. So tech specs, stage size, the detail of exactly what you need and what time slot you want, because there's nothing more frustrating than getting excited about a show and then you don't have the right space for it. So I think, yeah, just as much detail as possible, and passion about what the show's about and why you're bringing it to the Fringe for me.
Thomas, what about you in terms of what you're looking for from applications and people who approach you?
I think, it's part of one of the, I guess, the downsides of doing things by application is that people tend to, because it's the only sort of easy medium, is describe their show in writing, which of course is great, but that's not how any of us actually see shows. It's sort of based on, it's a very visual thing. So if you can include any footage of your previous work, it doesn't have to be the show that you're applying with. It's just good to get an idea with your style, sort of how you perform, that sort of thing. And if you're particularly early in your career and you don't have any footage that you're comfortable sharing because of the quality of the recording or whatever, even just sometimes like an image is sort of worthwhile. probably more so if it's a conceptual show rather than straight stand-up. I mean, you can't convey personality in a picture, but if it's a show that is sort of, I guess, lends itself to like comedy theatre, it's good to see some sort of assets, particularly like how you'd market that show. So I think if possible, visuals are a big steer that people often forget about. And they are, like, they're in our application forms, like the opportunity to post links and pictures. So I guess my advice would be, don't just brush those aside and sort of go straight into the describing.
That's great. That's really good to know. And Jodie, you said earlier on that you guys have such a range of different performances, and from comedy to theatre to circus. Is there anything in those particular strands that really help specifically stand out?
I think similar to what Thomas and Katy have said, just as much information as possible. It helps to have video and pictures to be able to see. If you're a theatre show, scripts are really helpful. Sometimes they may be in development, but even kind of early drafts or anything you have. In terms of circus, if you're looking at something like that, only certain ones of our venue will support that. So if you're doing a very particular show that needs a particular type of venue, I would recommend researching some of the venues first. One bit of advice I would give: people don't seem to think we're particularly approachable, which is probably our fault, but we're always here. So if you have questions about what venue you might need, what time you might need to be at, any of that stuff, you can always email us and we'll advise you as best as we can, especially if you've got a slightly niche show which might need a slightly different type of venue.
Great. And Ryan, I know that you obviously go and see a lot of shows. I mean, you all do, but I know that you've been seeing a lot of them. Is there anything in terms of the sort of preamble chat, if you go and see a show, that anyone should include to butter you up?
I don't think it's buttering up. I think that the key thing is everything that everyone said there, and remember that we all get hundreds of applications, and to try and make it as easy and as manageable as possible. And then once you get to that stage where it is actually, we're coming to see your try-up, certainly from my point of view, I like to see everything, is remember that will be the decision will be made on that show. So, you know, if I've been to shows and I've arrived and I've been one of 4 people there, and you know, it's been badly organized and all that kind of thing, and it just doesn't help because if you can't get more than 4 people in London to, you know, with your, or wherever you are, then you can't, in Edinburgh you're going to really struggle, and you just don't get that passion that Katy talks about, that, you know, you just want to fill it. And you know, we'll judge the show on what we'll judge it on, but you do get a sense from a company how much they want Edinburgh, and you can tell the ones that are going to really work hard for it.
Yeah, that's really great advice, I think, definitely with preview season and trying to get people in to see shows, having an audience, obviously.
Can I just add to that as well? Yeah. Don't just remember that, you know, programming goes over a long period of time, and we go and see shows, all the venues here go and see shows. Now is the busiest time. So if you can do a show that's not necessarily at one of those times, or even if it's in the afternoon somewhere or something, it's a lot easier for us to go and see it than it is if you just go, oh, I'm doing, you know, for the Vaults, for instance, we're all invited to shows from, you know, 5 o'clock in the afternoon to 9 o'clock at night. So it's having those flexible times to go and see as many shows as possible.
Great bits of advice there. And then Owen and Steve, I sort of wanted to get your guys' thoughts on how artists and promoters sort of can reach out to venues, and what you guys look for when you're looking to approach these guys for their spaces.
I'll let you go, Owen.
Sure. For us, I think it really comes back to what everybody was saying earlier about like having clear goals. So that's something that we work with artists from the moment that we are, you know, November, December, January, going, yes, this is a show that we really want to take on, is having those kind of clear and achievable goals. And then it's about the venue, and like, you know, not just the venue like overarching, but sometimes like the specific room and the specific time that's going to best achieve those goals. You know, for some people, whatever their specific goal is, the Free Fringe is absolutely the best thing to like tick those off. For some people, it's Monkey Barrel. For some people, it's a certain amount, you know, if the show is incredibly technically complex, you want to go into a room where you can achieve all of that, and not be stressing about that every day, because there's a certain sense of kind of infrastructure around you. So whatever those things are, whether they are industry focused, audience focused, financial, really influence what we think about with rooms. And then like capacities and, you know, time all kind of filter into that conversation, but it's got to be based on what that artist is looking to do.
Yeah, and just to add to that, on the specific thing, maybe I didn't consider initially when starting doing solo shows, is that like really think about the room that you're actually, the actual room that you're going to spend 25 nights in, and how that fits your specific show. Because that, you know, if you're doing like a intimate storytelling show, then you might want a room that is intimate and, you know, low ceilings and feels suitable for that style. Whereas if you're doing a big kind of routine show, then maybe a bigger stage and, you know, higher ceilings aren't as big a deal, you know, and really think about that. And I, you know, certainly my first year, I sort of just let my management find me a room, and then I got there and I was like, oh no, this isn't what I want. But that is too late at that point. And you do very much have to do it every night in that room. So I would say take ownership over which room you're doing, and interrogate your management or your producer, and make sure it's exactly the room that you want. And obviously not everyone, you don't obviously get the pick of the rooms, but just try your best to get one that suits you.
Great. Thanks, guys. Moving on to actually being in Edinburgh, and Ryan, I'm going to touch again a little bit on what you sort of said about those shows that do sometimes have 4 people in the audience. What kind of tips and tricks could you recommend on getting a crowd in, whether in Edinburgh or, you know, in the previews?
Oh, you're asking me? Oh, sorry.
All right. Anytime today.
Oh, that's fine. I think it's just a general, I mean, certainly Izzi will know this from being a marketing manager. It's working with the venue and working with us as much as possible, and just trying to get those, you know, word of mouth is what sells a show in Edinburgh. But you've got to get that word of mouth. And so whether that's working with the venue to get like some paper tickets at the beginning, or depending on which venue you're at and what the arrangement is, you just, you know, once you get that word of mouth, your show's good enough, when people hear about it, they'll go and see it. So you've just got to get people in. Get other performers to go and see it. They're there all month, and so they're the people that will chat about your show and say, "Oh, I saw this and this was great." So yeah, that'd be my starting point.
Yeah, great.
I'd actually add to that, having done marketing at the Fringe before, like talk to your venue. I think that's really important. That's the thing I can't recommend enough, is that, and I definitely, when I was at Pleasance, we had about 260 shows at any given Fringe. So the earlier someone was like, actually, I'm really struggling, I'm really worried about this show coming up, I've got press in, and like, I'm just not selling very well, you know, the sooner I could like meet them for a coffee, have a sit down, maybe make some suggestions, kind of get to know their show a bit better, and be a bit more kind of specific in my advice. So yeah, I think don't struggle in silence, like talk to your venue. They want, like, it's in their interest for you to sell well as well. So yeah, not seeing them as really unapproachable is good.
Yeah, and I know that, you know, when we worked in Edinburgh, inviting the people who are selling your tickets as well, invite the venue staff, all of those volunteers who've come up for a fantastic festival, they want to see as many shows as possible, so they're always really good people to get in as well.
Yeah, and they chat to people as well.
I think that also goes to like have your show ready as well, because if your show arrives in Edinburgh, there are those preview days which are the most important. And if you can get press in, and if you get people in, and your show is ready to go, and you're not kind of holding back, then you'll get ahead of most people, because a lot of shows go up there and use those days to tech and to play around with it and stuff. So if you can just be great from day one, then there's more people around to come and see it.
And also, just to add to that, there's so much opportunity to do extra shows, to do guest spots on package shows, particularly in the free Fringe, where just like the audiences are crying out to know what to go and watch, because they don't really know. So if they watch you do quite a funny 5 minutes, they'll come watch you, and it does take a bit more effort. You might have to do 2 or 3 a day, and flyer afterwards. But that word of mouth is the most powerful thing, but just them seeing you live also is very helpful.
Yeah, great, thanks. And then I'm just sort of going to throw over to Katy, Jodie, or Thomas, whoever fancies it. You guys obviously sort of program across comedy and theatre. Is there anything specifically that, obviously we've touched on quite a few things about the comedy side of things, but getting audiences into theatre shows, do you find that, you know, that might be a bit trickier? Are there ways that people can sort of look at doing that? If anyone wants to go for it.
It's helpful to kind of interrogate your show and think about who the audience is, especially if you've got a strong concept that might appeal to certain people or certain groups. think about how you can really target them. I think a lot of people get quite stressed about having to appeal to everyone all the time, and I don't think that's the case. I think it's knowing your audience. If there's ways you can reach out to people who you know would like that show, then that's really worth thinking about. And again, your venue can help you find those people and help you target them.
Yeah, I think I did agree just with everything that's already been said. Really lean on your venue expertise. I mean, they have a team of press and marketing that can support you and help you and talk to them and get as much out of your venue as you possibly can. And yeah, the people that you walk past when you're on your way into the show. I'm not saying bribe the box office team, but I'm definitely saying bribe them. Talk to them, introduce yourself, and make sure they know who you are. And yeah, a friendly face is very appreciated to the staff at the Fringe. So,
I would say I think it's worth sort of spending some time to understand how you can sell sort of your form of comedy in terms of what else it lends itself to. I mean, with the Fringe app and the Fringe website, people can search for quite specific interests like subgenres or absurdist comedy or loads of different sort of things that aren't just what people immediately think is straight stand-up. So if you can sort of have a think how you can appeal to a wider range of people than just a straight specific genre, it's worth doing. It's how people search for shows in this day and age. It's, you know, using the app and using the website and searching like keywords and that sort of thing.
Great, thanks guys. I think that sounds really helpful. Izzi, how are we doing with any Q&As from the audience? Do we have anything?
We've got some good questions. Okay, so first one, how is this year looking in terms of slots left? So obviously we've had a lot of rolling over of cancelled shows from the last couple of years. So have slots gone faster than usual? If someone's thinking about bringing a show up for 2022, what are the sort of odds of them getting programmed?
yeah, I think Thomas has already answered this in the chat, but we're about the same. We're about 30-40% of rollovers from the previous years, but there is a lot of space still left, and so it's definitely worth contacting venues, and we're definitely not full, and we'd love to hear from people.
Yeah, and Jodie and Ryan, is that sort of the same for you guys? It's sort of a bit of a mix.
Theatre wise, I think the theatre team are just kind of starting again really, but working with the companies that were booked for 2020. I've rolled over all my slots and we got about an 80% return rate, so that we're very limited with slots this year, but you know, this is the time when, you know, people you know, go to other venues or drop out, there's always availability, so it's worth applying. But just remember, this year is, yeah, normally we'd have lots of empty slots in start of February.
Yeah, I'd say we're fuller than we usually would be at this time of year. I'd say we're maybe 70% programmed already, but there is still a lot of stuff moving and a lot of turnover, so it's still worth applying.
Great, thanks everyone. So really good question. What is preview season? Because we've kind of used that phrase a lot, and I'm aware that some people here have never done Edinburgh or done this process. So yeah, it'd be great if you could explain that, Billie.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I sort of want to throw it over to Steve and Owen a little bit, because I think you guys will be the best to give us the full rundown.
Preview season is the most excruciating season you can ever go through, but it is completely necessary. It's basically the few months before Edinburgh, where you test your show. So you'll do hour-long shows in various, well, basically any location that will take you, and you work on the show and get it ready for Edinburgh, as Ryan says, so it's ready on the first day. There's lots of places that do specific previews, so there'll be lots of comedy clubs that turn into preview season, so you can book on there. You just have to travel a bit sometimes. I've done gigs up in Darlington for previews and in front of like 10 people, and you sort of think, oh god, why did I do that? But actually they all do help. And in terms of, I think someone asked how many you should do. I think every comedian is different. I think you can over preview. I think there's a danger you can do too many. You're actually quality sometimes better than quantity. The real thing is you want to have time between previews to work on it. That's the key. You don't want to just keep making the same mistakes over and over again. You need like a few days between the previews to change something for the next preview. I would say anywhere around 10 to 15 previews is a solid amount, as long as you've worked up the material before. Maybe more, maybe less. It depends how good you are. But yeah, it's good to do them so that you're ready.
Thank you. In terms of sort of previewing theatre, I think there is a different sort of world in which that exists as well, but I think it is quite similar. I don't know, Katy or Jodie or Thomas, what your experiences of sort of theatres shows doing previews or circuses and stuff like that.
I think, yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily know from theatre company side of you how often or how regularly they do them in a row, but I'd say certainly from sort of January, February and March tend to be our busiest time as programmers of going out and seeing stuff for Fringe. We can see stuff sort of even like sort of April, May, but it tends to be that sort of now is the time, really the best time in terms of getting something locked in and prepared to go for Fringe. But if you don't have that, that doesn't mean to say that it's too late. I mean, deadlines of Fringe this year have been pushed back anyway, so pushed back later than they normally would be. So I guess there's still more time to book those things in.
It's worth saying, just from a press perspective as well, just from my PR days, there is a kind of benefit if you're taking a theatre show up of not doing too many previews. I think to be Fringe first eligible, you need to have done less than 6 performances previously. So quite often theatre shows will do maybe 2 or 3 nights in London as a little kind of prelude and then go up, but it's quite sort of limited. And even shows that come to Vault do think about that as well. So might do a shorter run.
Great, thanks. How are we getting on in the chat? Izzy, are you happy to keep looking at those and I'll fling
Yeah, sure thing. So really good question. Could anyone speak to what a typical day or week in Edinburgh looks like for a team of artists? So from the kind of flip side, I know that might be something you guys haven't done for a while, programmers, but anything you sort of see a lot of, hear a lot of?
I would say I probably should have said it on the earlier question as well, in terms of how do you sort of sell a show that only has that sort of low numbers, in that particularly if we're talking in terms of comedy, the chances are your show's probably a bit later in the day, so you sort of have the whole day to sell your show, and that's what I would imagine, that's what I would like you to be doing. You know, I know, like, obviously there's a lot of work goes into a show and it's sort of quite physically exhausting, but then unless you're willing to put sort of work, like footwork in, walking around town, speaking to people, then it's probably not going to move much beyond a few tickets. So yeah, you have to be willing to go out, speak to people, flyer, and constantly be on the move, really. I think your day is much longer than your hour show.
Cool. Anyone want to add to that from other venues? Or Steve, I know you obviously go up as an artist, so.
Yeah, I mean, yes, as Thomas said, it's a pretty full-on day. You know, it depends where you're at, whether you can sort of pay for flyers or if you're doing your own flyering, that makes a huge difference. But you might do 2 or 3 hours flyering day, sometimes more. You might do some extra shows and then fly those shows. Obviously, you need to go and watch your friends' shows, which you've promised to go and watch. And then you do your show, and then, you know, you might go out in the evening. That's the general day. It's pretty exhausting, and I would advise curbing the drinking as much as you can, because it catches up with you. But yeah, certainly you're doing your show is the smallest part of the day. It's all the other stuff before, and the flyering, really, certainly when you're starting out, is the thing that really makes a difference.
And if you don't have the luxury of someone like Owen's team to look after you, then you have to the flyering, and also it's the finding a review, and it's the, you know, photocopying that review, stapling it to every flyer so that when you hand it to someone, they've got something to look at. And then it's kind of, you know, last minute tweaks, rehearsing, you know, the days can really fill up with that kind of admin side of things that you need to do, and sort of poster splashes and all these kind of bits and pieces.
Yeah, I think it's really tough for comedians because often they're by themselves, so they're having to do everything all by themselves. I think if you're lucky enough to be in a theatre company or with a bit of support around you or in a bigger team, it's really worth trying to plan your days a bit so you can rota who's going to flyer, who's going to email press, who's going to go and stick posters up. And so you can give everyone a bit of a break and really kind of look after each other and support each other. It's really exhausting and really tiring. So if you have the luxury of being in a team, it's really worth making sure you all have breaks and doing it properly.
Really good question. It'd be great to hear programmers' views on what makes a good fit for their venue. Why is a show more suitable for your venue versus another venue? Anyone want to take that first?
Go on, Tommy.
Yeah, well, I think I wouldn't necessarily, I don't know if Underbelly has done this on purpose in the past, or if it's just something they've taken a reputation for and then run with it. But I think there's certain, I mean, particularly in terms of our hubs, there's like certain directions that we would push a show toward based on its own merits. Like, for example, if some quite like absurdist comedy, we tend to put in Cowgate late night because we know that it does well and it's proven in that way. Whereas if it's something that is perhaps more straight stand-up, we might look at putting it in Bristol. And that's not a hard and fast rule. We don't, we're never going to say, no, you can't go into Bristol because your show is this. It just tends to be that whether it was one way or the other, that's how things have sort of developed and people have come to understand it. And therefore, why fix it if it isn't broken kind of thing? I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah.
I would say do your research and kind of find out which venue does suit your show the best sometimes. Technically, that's a good thing. And also, you know, some like the Pleasance, our day is kind of split up. The first half of the day is very theatre, you know, it's a bit theatre heavy. And then we kind of breach into comedy sort of the afternoon, more kind of sketchy stuff, kind of, you know, sort of easier stuff. And then the late night could be a mixture of, you know, sort of comedy, theatre, cabaret, and anything. So kind of look at the venue that, you know, if you've got a really, you think it's a serious, you know, the Traverse for theatre is known for theatre, and, you know, where the Monkey Bar is solely comedy, and then other venues, etc., etc. So just do some research in terms of where you think your show would sit best.
Yeah, I think it's worth talking to people that have done the festival before, and asking them as well. If you've been offered a venue, ask other performers if they know anyone that's been in that room, and that could be really useful.
Yeah, I think adding to that as well, if you've got theatre companies that you really admire or comedians that you really admire or shows that you've seen in Edinburgh that you love, like look at where they were on, and that's a really good starting point as well. Look at like people you kind of want to have their career and where they're performing is always really good.
Can I just add to that as well? Sorry, Izzy, is just prepared to compromise as well, because, you know, you might be like, well, my show has to go at 6 o'clock, and in one venue would have, you know, the right venue, but that necessarily means that technically you've got to compromise on your show and that you can't do the technical aspects that you wanted to do. So actually, by going maybe at 2 o'clock, because people go and see stuff at the Fringe all day, being at 2 o'clock is not a bad thing, because actually you're not competing against everything. So if you think you can achieve the right thing for your show, especially with theatre stuff, if you can be at the right venue with the right technical things and the big enough get in and the, you know, the right flying equipment, etc., take that over the fact that you just have this idea that 6 o'clock is the time that people will come and see my show.
I probably should, sorry. I just wanted to also add, I should have thought of it earlier, is probably the best way to find out where your specific show sits venue-wise. Get your hands on some old brochures, and sort of try and like get an understanding of, if this is Underbelly's program, are shows that are similar to mine, have they been programmed in the past? And then the same for other venues, or try and look for shows that match your vibe or your style and see which of the venues they've been in. I mean, it's difficult to say specifically what our brand of programming is, because it's a mashup of everything, in terms, like I said, across genre and styles and that sort of thing. But I think you know your show better than we ever will. So if you can identify another, like a previous show that you think, okay, mine's probably going to go in at to the same market as this one, where was it, and can I find out how well it did, to see if my brand can align with that venue's brand. Because whether fuck it, I'll say it anyway. I think if, like, it's often very easy as a programmer to, if I'm reading an application that's come into Underbelly, sometimes I'll know that the brand of the aesthetic of that show coming in is probably lends itself better to another venue and their brand. But no programmer is going to say that to you on application, because if they think you have a good show, that we want it. So it's kind of on you to sort of try and figure that out, because there is that element of competition, like commercial competition, that whether we like it or not, and whether we really care about it, it does exist. So I'd say, yeah, get your hands on some brochures and do your literal research.
Thanks, everyone. And we've got just a few more questions. I'm going to fire them out as quickly as I can. I would like to know more about bringing an international work to Edinburgh, and specifically if you know more info about the International Edinburgh Festival, and is it the same as the Fringe?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. The International Festival is heavily curated, heavily funded, you know, plan their programs years in advance. And the Fringe was kind of a, what was the right word? A reaction to that for amateurs to come and do, to perform in Edinburgh alongside that festival. And that's where the Fringe grew bigger than the International Festival. The Fringe has an enormous amount of international work, so that is not something that would put off anyone programming your work. So you can absolutely bring international work to the Fringe. The International Festival is a different beast, and I can give you contact details if you need them, but yeah, probably not worth it. Come to the Fringe.
Right.
Oh, sorry, Izzy.
No, you go for it.
We bring over, I mean, roughly 5 or 6 international acts each year, and have done for the last few years. I would say, obviously, programmers aren't going to be able to go and see your shows, so recordings of them become super important. The best thing they can do is see an hour, and if they can't be there, then have that on video. And also appreciate that, and I hope that people on this call would echo that, like, everybody knows that if you're planning to do a show in August and it's currently the beginning of February, like, that's 6 months away. They don't necessarily want to see the finished thing. Obviously, if that exists, then great. But a sense of like who you are, the stuff that you're trying to do with this show, and like therefore how it's going to connect with an audience is what they want to see on film. The other thing that we really try and do, and sometimes it's impossible for whatever reason, is we try and get our international acts over in July for like a week or maybe 2 if we can do. And we try and do some previews with them in London or elsewhere, because you might have a show that's done the Melbourne Comedy Festival and New Zealand or whatever, but it still plays slightly differently to a different audience, and trying to just like iron that stuff out over like 2 or 3 previews before you go to Edinburgh means that you can do what Ryan said earlier, like just hitting the ground with a really solid show that is tailored to the audience that it's already playing to on day one. But yeah, those are the only things that I'd kind of like consider as being like somewhat different than being a UK based act.
It's definitely, I think, one of my favourite things about Edinburgh is you get to see artists from all over the world in a way that you maybe don't all the time, sort of year round. That's definitely one of my favourite things about being up there, for sure. And there's a real audience for that, I think. It's also a massively international audience, like people come over just for Edinburgh from all over the world. So yeah, that's also really exciting, I think. We're considering taking our show up for 2 weeks rather than the full month to curb the financial risk a bit. Is this a good idea? What are the pitfalls to be aware of when you're going for a shorter period of time? Probably definitely something a lot of artists will be thinking about this year.
I would say that as a programmer, it can be a little bit more difficult to find a slot for your show if it's only doing a limited run. Only because we have to fill our venue for a month. So if you're only doing a week and a half, we then have to find a show that's doing that sort of 2.5 weeks to match it. And that can be a bit tricky. It's not to say that it doesn't happen and that you shouldn't do it. But I would consider how much cheaper it makes it for you, because you still have those like travel costs, you still have to sort of pay for design work, and it's better to stretch that over a longer period to recoup. I mean, I understand there'll be ongoing charges like accommodation that are time specific, but I would argue that sometimes it is just better to do it for the full month. whether you can or not is a different question. I realize I'm saying that without a solution, but my advice would be always to do the month if you can. But you also don't want to find yourself in a situation where you only go up to do the first 2 weeks, and then your show just starts building momentum and your audiences are growing every day, and then you have to stop because there's another show coming in. So yeah, you need careful consideration rather than it just being, it'll be half the cost.
Any other programmers? Jodie, do you guys tend to have anyone who does sort of shorter runs in your venue?
Yeah, we used to advise against it if possible for all the reasons that Thomas has just outlined. If you're going to do it, it doesn't actually cut that many costs if you only do it for 2 weeks. Also, you need the time to build the press and the word of mouth and the audience. Obviously, this year's a little bit different, so we are seeing more part runs requested and we're trying to program them in more this year. So that's something we're accommodating a bit more. But yeah, as Thomas said, I'd interrogate the reasons why you're doing it. It's always better, if you can, to do the full month. Although obviously this year, a lot of people can't do that, I know.
Interestingly, with oh, sorry. The last.
No, sorry, Izzi, you go.
I've got like a bit of a delay in my side, I think. As I say, the last Fringe I worked, worked the full Fringe was as a PR, working for a little PR agency and also kind of helping run the Pleasance press office. And we had reviewers booking in right up until the bank holiday Monday, which is the final day of the Fringe, and like some big reviewers as well for shows that have been on all month. So yeah, that kind of press and industry stuff. Whereas in London, you'd maybe get that like at the beginning of your run, that literally carries on all the way through. That momentum just never stops. So that is also something to be aware of.
I think it again goes back to like what those goals are. Some goals are much easier to achieve over, or at least, you know, you set yourself up in the best possible way over a month. On the flip side, if you're not necessarily ready to like go and do quote unquote your hour, and this year you're like, I would really like to get some solid stage time in the same room in front of like a great audience for 14 days, which no one is getting at the moment in terms of just like solid stage time is yours. Go up at like absolutely do, you know, if you can get 2 weeks on in a free Fringe venue, and you can be up there seeing shows and you can be getting, you know, interesting people just like other comics or, you know, whoever fun people that you see up there to come and see your shows, you'll be in a much better position come 2023 when you might be like, okay, I've got a clearer idea of what I want to be seen to be doing for the full month and, you know, some clearer goals in mind. The Fringe is so expensive. Like no one should do it, particularly in like a bells and whistles proper, whatever you believe that to be, way, unless they have like a clear kind of thing. And most of the time, a month does achieve those things easier. But there's nothing to stop anybody going and doing 2 weeks if they want like really solid stage time and to go back to what Steve was saying much earlier, to become a better comic through that.
Great, thank you everyone. Billie, I've got 2 more quite quick questions. Are you happy for me to fire those in?
Go for it. Let's squeeze it in and then we'll wrap.
So one of them is what are the awards that a show is eligible for at the Fringe and the benefits a show can get? So British Council Showcase, etc. I'm aware this is quite a big question because that list is pretty infinite, and Katy has very helpfully put a list in the chat just on the Ed Fringe website. But if anyone's got any off the top of their head that are like really worth looking out for, that would be awesome. I know Ryan, you could probably speak to this because Pleasance does quite a few things that are kind of specific support wise about going up.
Yeah, I mean, certainly in the theatre side of things, we do quite a lot. I'm not sure of the vast list of them, but they're on our website. But we do the Generator Fund, we do the Charlie Hyle Theatre Reserve Fund, and also there's loads of partnerships with different theatres around the country that Team Theatre have set up. So it's kind of, yeah, so just have a look. And then certainly if you're a comedian, we sort of do a thing called the Comedy Reserve where we support 4 comedians just doing 15 minutes. But different venues do different things, and so yeah, it's definitely worth having a look at. You know, you can help get funding on those things and get the support from the venue, which is worth lots.
Anyone else got any others they want to throw in? British Council, I think, is pretty specific. It's like every 2 years. Programmers can probably tell me more about this than I can actually relay, but yeah, there are kind of various awards that are worth looking out for, and that link Katie's put in the chat, so the take part / awards is really worth looking at. Different shows will be eligible for different things. And then the last question was, this is a really good one to end on, was how do we get our shows under your noses? Obviously a lot of artists in this chat, we're going to be doing Vault this year, so we're going to be inviting programmers to that, and Vault obviously now isn't happening, very sadly. So what are the other ways that artists can engage with you, invite you to stuff, get in touch?
For us at Underbelly, it would be to do an application via Eventotron is the best way to, as you say, go under our noses. I mean, it is the dedicated form for it. If you email me and say, "Hi, I'd like to bring my show to Fringe. Can we have a chat?" It's probably not going to get you as far as I would like it to as well, just because it's good for us to have something to go off in order to have that conversation, because I first of all need to know that it's suitable for our venue, that we have somewhere that it can fit. And I know it feels impersonal to write out an application and send it off into the abyss, but I'm trying very hard to make sure that over the next month or so, I will have read every application that comes in, and given it as much time as I possibly can. So yeah, it might feel impersonal, but for me, it's the best way anyway.
I think most of the venues, am I right in thinking all the guys here, you all use Eventotron? That's sort of the standard.
We just have a form on our website, but I'm absolutely happy for people to contact me direct. So I'll put my email in the chat.
Right.
No worries about that. Yeah, I'd rather get an email from people that are interested and watching this video than, yeah, it's good to have direct contact.
Yeah, I think Katie's absolutely right. I mean, sort of people who have made the effort to do this, especially if they've made it this far, then they, then they're obviously very keen on getting to Edinburgh. And you know, you want people like that who are doing the research and shows that are doing everything they can to find out what it is, and not just going, "Oh, I've heard Edinburgh's a lot of fun. I'm just going to take my show up there and make millions of pounds and win all the awards." So yeah, ours is an online form that we have, and yeah, fill it in as soon as possible, really, with as much information as possible.
And something that's worth saying as well for anyone, I know that obviously it's really heartbreaking that Vault has been cancelled this year, but there are a lot of opportunities from loads of different venues around London and the UK who have very kindly offered to, you know, take shows that have been, you know, have lost their slots. So, and I know that, you know, Pleasance and other people have done it. So we'll put that link in the chat as well. So it's really worth looking at those opportunities too. But I think that might be all we have time for now.
Yeah. I think we've got through all the questions, which is
amazing.
Great. Everyone.
Well, listen, thank you so much, guys. Thank you to Ryan, Katy, Owen, Steve, Jodie, and Thomas. Thank you so much for offering your time. It's been really nice to see everyone, actually. It's been a long time since I've seen you all. And also everyone watching and engaging. Thank you so much for joining us. If you do have any questions or you think you've missed something out, then obviously, yeah, Katie's popped her email in. The links will be in the chat for everyone on.
Adele's also put a message in the chat with just a load of useful stuff. So everyone's Twitter handles and Billie's email address, and Berk, our head of programming's email address as well.
Yeah, and feel free to drop us a line. But thank you so much. And yeah, good luck on all your applications to Edinburgh.